Hello, this is Nova Topflex, and in this video I will be speaking about Request for Comments number 3 from April 1969 about the original documentation conventions. The earlier Request for Comments 1 and 2 were both titled host software, though the capitalization was slightly different. The Network Working Group, NWG of the time, was concerned with the host software, strategies for using the network, and initial experiments with the network. Documentation of the efforts was through notes such as Request for Comments like number 3, which may be produced at any site by anybody and included in the series. The content of a Network Working Group note at the time may have been any thought, suggestion, or the like related to the host software or other aspect of a network, encouraged to be timely rather than polished. Philosophical positions without examples or other specific suggestions or implementation techniques without introductory or background explication, and explicit questions without any attempted answers are all acceptable. The minimum length for a Network Working Group note is 1 sentence. These standards, or lack thereof, were stated explicitly at the time for 2 reasons. First, a tendency to view a written statement as ipso facto authoritative, and also to promote the exchange and discussion of considerably less than authoritative ideas. And second, a natural hesitancy to publish something unpolished, hoping to ease the inhibition. So every Network Working Group note should bear the following information at the time. Network Working Group, Request for Comments, X, where X is a serial number. At the time, they were assigned by Bill DeVola SRI, author and affiliation, date, and title, which need not be unique. RFC1 and RFC2 are almost identical titles. Distribution. 1 copy only will have been sent from the author's site to, at the time it was Bob Kahn, BB&N, Larry Roberts, ARPA, Steve Carr, UCLA, Jeff Rolson, Utah, Ron Stoughton, UCSB, and Steve Crocker, UCLA. At the time, reproduction of this request for comment may have been handled locally. That was by April 1969 standards. Things have changed a lot since then. And at that point, the other notes that were planned for then and at the time were Network Timetable, the philosophy of NIL, specifications for NIL, and the deeper documentation of host software. Note that the documentation conventions have been updated by later RFCs, even in 1969 and 1970. So RFC 10, the 10th request for comment, was a revision. It continues to say any thought, suggestion, etc. related to host software or other aspect with timely rather than polished notes. Philosophical positions without examples or other specific suggestions or implementation techniques, explicit questions, 1 sentence. The minimum length for a Network Working Group note is 1 sentence. That had been true before. And while RFC 28 and RFC 29 were not 1 sentence, they were more like 1 paragraph, those are permitted requests for comments, and they can get pretty personal as well, depending on the one. And then, yes, still Network Working Group, except, so RFC 10 changed the serial numbers. At that point, Steve Crocker at UCLA would start to assign serial numbers. And then, at the time, yes, I'm not going to say these, but sometimes addresses are included in the request for comments. Now, RFC 16 was the MIT upgrade for this request for comment, so wrong request for comments. 7 is host IMP interface. Sorry for the interruption. Request for comment 16. At that point, MIT was now to receive all Network Working Group memos. This was on August 27th, 1969. And then 24, 27, and 30 would update earlier RFCs as well. 24 was a revision of 10 and 16, both NWG and RFC. Network Working Group requests for comments continued to be the same situation, except yes. Reassurance and RFC 24 updated RFC 3 and RFC 10. At this point, there are now 11. There are now 11 members of the Request for Comments Network Working Group. I believe it was 5 or 6 before from previous RFC reading. But at that point, it was 11 with RFC 24. And then Again, addresses are typical for RFCs. And then RFC 27 would upgrade, or update rather, RFC 24. 10, 16, and 24, the standards remain the same, but RFC 27 was reassurance. On RFC 24, there were 11 members of the network working group. With RFC 27, there was a 12th member. RFC 30. RFC 30 is again documentation conventions and intended to revise on network working group requests for comments 10, 16, 24, and 27. With interested people from existing or potential, at the time it was again ARPA network sites, February 4th, 1970. And the content, same standards, but RFC 24, so there was definitely growth already. I believe there were 5 or 6 members at first in RFC 3 and RFC 10, but in RFC 24, it was up to 11, RFC 27 up to 12, and RFC 30 up to 14. But still with the original documentation conventions. Don't worry about necessarily having too many standards or a significant number. In some RFCs are just revisions of earlier RFCs and are just slightly or moderately updated versions. And thanks for watching. Until next video, goodbye.